Thank you all for joining us on such a lovely evening. We really appreciate it. In just a moment, I will pass it over to my colleague Sam Deniski, who will be leading the presentation. But my name is Justice, and I am the Community Outreach Intern with MadiSUN. The presentation will be about 30 minutes and will feature some of our installers. Then we'll leave time at the end for an open question session. If you do have questions throughout the presentation, though, feel free to put them in the chat. Use the Q&A function or the raise hand function, which should all be options on the menu bar. We are recording this and it will be posted to our event. I will pass it over to my colleague, Sam.
Thank you, Justice, and thank you everyone for joining us tonight on such a lovely evening, as Justice pointed out. My name is Sam Deniski. I am the Distributed Resources Director here at Renew Wisconsin. Renew Wisconsin is a renewable energy advocacy organization. We promote solar power, wind power, hydroelectric power, geothermal, biofuels, and electric vehicles as well. And Renew Wisconsin administers the MadiSUN Solar programs on behalf of the City of Madison. So this is a city-led program, and we're really, really happy you could all attend tonight. We're going to talk a little bit about our agenda here in just a second, but I want to acknowledge and thank our co-hosts for this evening, the City of Monona. Thankfully this year, MadiSUN received a grant that enabled us, to promote the program to homeowners across Dane County. And tonight, the City of Monona is helping us out with some outreach. So at this point, I'd like to hand it over to Elisa Guerrero at the City of Monona to talk a little bit more about what Monona is doing. So Lisa, go ahead, it's all yours.
Great, thank you, Sam. So like Sam said, my name is Elisa Guerrero. I work with the City of Monona. I'm the city's sustainability and urban planning intern. So I work very closely with both staff in the city as well as the city's sustainability committee on all of our renewable energy and other sustainability programs. We were really excited to partner with Renew and MadiSUN on this webinar because promoting more rooftop solar for residents of Monona is a big it's something we want to promote as a city. I think it supports really well the city's 2019 100% clean energy and resiliency resolution, which has a goal of meeting all of our community and municipal energy needs through renewable energy. But there are a few different metrics there, but the idea is to meet all of our energy needs with renewables by 2050, both for municipal energy and residential. So there are lots of sustainability programs that the city has that I could talk about, but I wanted to highlight a couple that I think might be relevant to those who are attending this webinar and interested in solar for their homes. So the first is the Renew Monona Loan Program that we have, this program aims to provide low interest loans for a variety of different sort of home improvement, home renovation projects to help promote affordability for homes in Monona. But recently we added solar panels and other renewable energy technology as an eligible project for these loans. So they're aimed at homes that I believe are at 120% or below of median home price in Monona. But it's something that if you're considering solar panels, I'd be happy to talk more about it later. If you have questions, I guess. The second program that I wanted to highlight is our Sustainability Champions program, which is really an outreach and education program where we've partnered with students from MG21 to interview Monona residents who have projects like solar panels, who have done things like home energy audits or have electric vehicles, rain gardens, other projects in their homes that promote sustainability. And we interview them and sort of get to know their story, what their motivations were for taking on those projects. And we've compiled them all into an interactive map that people can check out and learn more about what other residents are doing, because there are so many great projects that might be in someone's backyard or on someone's roof that you can't even see from the street. So we've really been wanting to promote all of the great work that our residents are already doing. So if you're interested in seeing what other residents in Monona have done for their solar panels, you can check that out. And if you end up getting solar on your roof and want to be featured on that map, we would love to include you as part of that program. Or if you have other sustainability features that you think might be a good addition. So those are the two programs that I wanted to highlight. And like I said, we're really excited to be co-hosting this webinar. And with that, I will pass it back to Sam.
Thanks, Elisa. Make sure to put the links for those programs in the chat when you can, because I think people would definitely like to take a look at those, kind of on their own time. Elisa, thankfully, will be sticking around till the end of the discussion as well. So if you think of any questions that maybe pertain to the city of Monona, she's gonna stick around and get in on the Q&A session. Also going to be here, thankfully, for the Q&A session, my good friend Stanley Minnick. And he is one of our installers. He is an installer with Arch Electric. So if you have technical questions, definitely save them for him as well. But if you do have questions throughout the presentation, like Justice said, feel free to drop them either in the chat or in the Q&A session. And we'll try to either answer them in real time or we'll save them for the end. So I just want to thank everyone again for joining us tonight. So we're going to talk about solar, specifically home solar, and kind of the benefits. I'm going to go over the agenda here in just a second, but before I go, I always make sure to start with this slide because that photo in the center there, that is my parents' solar array. So I always like to highlight that. And a big couple of reasons I like to highlight that, mostly because it's my family, but also because my family, my parents still live in northern Minnesota. So I like to say that, if solar can work in northern Minnesota, it can work just about anywhere. So I always really like to start out with this slide. So we're going to talk a little bit more, obviously, about solar tonight. We're going to talk about how solar works. We're going to talk about some reasons why it's a good idea for you to install solar panels on your rooftop. And then we're also going to talk in a little bit more detail, hopefully, about solar economics and incentives. We're going to walk through some price examples. We're going to walk through some incentives and rebates that you can apply for and things like that. Then we're going to talk about the process as well and kind of follow it up, like I said, with that Q&A session as well. So I want to start with how solar works. Some of you might already be pretty familiar with it. Some of you may not be. So I just want to make sure we're at least all starting out with some basic level of solar panel knowledge. When we talk about solar tonight, we're going to be talking about solar PV or solar photovoltaic, which is essentially solar electricity. We're not talking about solar hot water or anything like that. So the components of a solar PV system are pretty sparse. We really only are concerned with two main pieces of equipment when we're talking about a solar PV system. And those two main components are our solar modules, which I'm sure you're all pretty familiar with, also known as solar panels, and also inverters as well. So the inverters kind of do the behind the scenes work. When a solar panel makes electricity, it makes it in DC or direct current. Most of our homes, appliances, lights, things like that, they use alternating current. So the inverter converts that DC or direct current into alternating current that can be used by our lights, our TVs, our phones, our laptops, et cetera, et cetera. There are now a couple of different types of inverters. So this is sort of a classic inverter, but there are inverters also known as microinverters, which are located on or near the solar panels themselves. Those can have some additional benefits as well, in addition to saving on some space. It can also provide some more detailed info on your solar array. Stanley will discuss a little bit more about microinverters, I'm sure, at the end, because he knows a lot more about how those items operate than I do. The good news is, though, inverters are really great because they can connect to monitoring equipment. So you can monitor your solar arrays production. You can also monitor your own electric use as well in real time. So this is a way for some of us out there who might be maybe a little bit more tech nerds or looking into data and things like that. This is a way for you to really carefully monitor your system. So that's kind of the inverter. going to kind of backtrack a little bit and talk about the solar modules themselves. This is sort of the front-facing part of the solar system. As you know, this kind of does the main light work, converting the sunlight into electricity. It does this through a chemical process, so there is no real moving parts in a solar module or a solar panel that can break down. It's basically made up of two different layers of silicon. When the sun hits those two, when that sun hits that top layer, excuse me, it excites the electrons, and those electrons then are kind of channeled into some wires, and then that's what goes down into your inverter, and then again through your inverter, it goes into your home. Because it's a chemical reaction and there's no moving parts or anything to break down, these solar panels can last a really long time. All of these solar panels that our 3 different solar installers are using this year have a 25-year warranty. That means they're going to last at least 25 years, if not longer. The degradation rate of those solar panels is less than 1%, which means even 20 years from now or longer, you're still going to be making quite a bit of energy, anywhere from about 90% or more still of your energy, even after a couple of decades. So it's really an easy system to maintain. There is nothing, there's no oil changes. There's not really a lot of maintenance that has to happen with these systems. Typically, each solar panel is about the size of a door. There are 2 different sizes of solar panels. The one that's the size of a door is a 72 cell panel. And when we talk about cells, those are those small little squares located within the solar panel. So in a 72 cell panel, which is again the size of about a door, there'll be 72 of those cells in there. There is a slightly shorter version of that, which is a 60 cell version. That just means there's 60 of those little squares in there. And so that panel, basically about the same width, but just a little bit shorter. So 2 different sizes. The only real difference there, they don't work any differently. The only difference between the 2 is that sometimes we can fit those smaller panels into tighter spaces where we can't fit the bigger ones into. So that's kind of the breakdown of the 2 main components. Here is kind of a working model, or not really a working model, but here's a diagram of a solar array kind of in action. And when we talk about solar arrays, solar projects for the most part tonight, we're going to be talking about grid-tied solar arrays. A lot of folks, maybe not a lot of folks, but certainly some folks still have an idea that once they do solar, they're going to be off the grid. They're not going to be reliant on the power company for anything. That option is possible. But we typically advise against it for a couple of reasons. First of all, it's much more expensive. Second of all, you're going to have to go through some pretty big lifestyle changes in order to make an off-grid system work. So that's why we kind of advise folks kind of steer clear of an off-grid system. A grid-tied solar array is really great, and I'm going to explain why just now. So in a typical grid-tied solar array, what happens is the sun hits your panels up there on the roof. Again, those panels create direct current. That direct current electricity flows down into your inverter, where it's converted into alternating current right there at number 2. And from there, it flows through your electric box and out into your home, to your lights, to your TVs, your appliances, et cetera, et cetera. So when the sun is shining, your appliances and all your electricity in your home should be powered. And a lot of times, especially during the summer months, even at times like this, your solar array is actually going to be producing more electricity than what you're actually consuming, unless it's a day like today and you have to have your air conditioner on pretty high. So at those times when your solar array is producing more electricity than you need, what will happen is at step number 4 there, that excess electricity will actually flow back through your meter and then out onto the grid. It goes down the street to your neighbor's neighbor, et cetera, et cetera. And your meter dials backwards, essentially. It's a digital meter, so it doesn't actually dial backwards, but it will dial down, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Then at night, on cloudy days or at other times when your home is using or consuming more electricity than your solar array is producing, you will take energy in off the grid. So that is essentially exactly how you take in power right now. So whenever your solar array again isn't producing enough electricity, you'll be able to take that in off the grid. And you won't notice the difference if you're just sitting at home, watching TV, listening to music, et cetera, et cetera. The great thing about a grid-tied solar array is that when that electricity flows back through your meter, when you're sending that excess electricity to the grid, your meter is crediting you for every kilowatt hour that you put back onto the grid. And then when you take it in off the grid, your meter will essentially dial back forward again. And the good news about that is you just pay the net of that meter. And that's a policy we call net metering. So it, in some ways, kind of acts as like a virtual battery for those of you that don't want to actually go through the process and the expense of buying the battery. From the standpoint of your utility bill, this sort of acts as a battery. So let's say your solar array in a given month will produce 600 kilowatt hours and you consume 700 kilowatt hours. You will only be responsible for paying for 100 kilowatt hours and then whatever fixed charges you have or connection charges that you have. So we like to kind of talk about this as sort of like credits. You can bank those credits for days when it's cloudy, at nighttime as well, when you're using excess electricity, and your electricity bill will reflect that. So it's kind of a way of, I use the analogy rollover electricity, sort of like rollover minutes on a cell phone used to be. I need to come up with a new analogy, but that's the best one that I can give for most of us. So it's a great way for you to, like I said, kind of bank electricity or bank sunlight that you get during the day and be able to use it during the night. Good news is also for those of you who are Madison Gas and Electric customers, you can actually not just bank that excess electricity from day to day, but you can actually bank it from month to month. So months like this in the summertime, when you're really producing a lot of electricity for many hours during the day, you can actually roll those credits over to the darker fall and winter months as well. I have a better example here of sort of what net metering looks like. So this is an actual graph of production from a real residential solar array. So the area in red, as you can see, that is where this person's home is consuming electricity off the grid. The area in green, that's this person's solar production. So as you can see, they kind of use electricity here intermittently in the early morning hours. Then around 7 o'clock, sun comes up and their solar array starts producing electricity. It continues to increase in production until around 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and that's when the sun kind of starts to dip in the horizon. And at that point, their solar array production starts to taper off as well until we get to about 6 or 7 o'clock at night, when the sun sets completely, and then their solar production turns off. So as you can see, the area in the green and the area in the red don't always overlap perfectly. The areas where they do, the blue shading area, that's where this person's solar array, or excuse me, that's where this person's home is consuming their solar electricity in real time. So as you can see, there's a lot of green on this chart. There's also a lot of red. Essentially what net metering allows us to do is kind of take that area in green and kind of shove it into the areas in red and make up for that electricity. So this is another reason, especially from an economic standpoint, of why net metering is really a great policy, why it's really important for us to have as residential solar owners. The last thing I want to point out here before I hand it over to our installers for just a minute is one of the main things that we look at when we're evaluating homes, the main thing that I should say we look at when we're evaluating homes is rooftops. So solar certainly can go on the ground, it can be ground mounted, but for those of us that live in the city and in the suburbs, ground space might be kind of a premium, so that's why we typically put it on roofs. So we typically look for unshaded roofs first and foremost. If you have trees or other buildings or other things blocking your path to the sun, that's going to definitely reduce the amount of electricity that you can make over the course of a day or a month or a year. The second thing we look at is the age of your roof. Ideally, you want to go in with as new of a roof as possible. The reason for that, of course, being those solar panels, like I said, will last for at least 25 years. So if you go out and purchase a new shingled roof, like the one in this picture here, shingle roofs last for about the same amount of time, maybe a little bit longer, maybe about 30 or 40 years. So we like to tell people, you want to go in with as new of a roof as possible, because if you have to replace that roof, during the lifespan of your solar system, that is going to come at an extra cost. It's going to lengthen your return on investment because you're going to have to have someone come disconnect those panels, remove them, have a roofer do the re-roofing project, and then have a solar installer reattach and reconnect those panels. So it is possible. We just like to tell people to avoid it if they can, because it's just going to be an added expense that you don't want to incur if you don't have to. South-facing roofs are the best, but thanks to increases in technology, efficiency, and also our net metering policies, east and west-facing rooftops are totally okay now, assuming they are not shaded. Really, the main direction that we don't want the panels to go on is north, or some degree within north. But these east and west facing arrays are very much okay now, and that's actually kind of a new development just in the last 5 years or so. Before that time, your roof really did have to face south. And then the last thing, but certainly not the least, you want an energy efficient home. We always tell folks that the cheapest kilowatt hour is the one you never have to make in the first place. So if you have appliances that are old and inefficient, if you have old incandescent light bulbs, you want to change that out first. You want to upgrade mainly the electric part of your infrastructure, but possibly your insulation as well. So something to think about there. If you can decrease the total amount of electricity you use and you consume, that means you don't have to buy as large of an array. You can purchase a smaller array, and you can purchase that at a lower cost. So that's why we really want to make sure people understand that energy efficiency is a really important part of this process. So that ends sort of the first part of the discussion. I see we have a couple of other of our solar installers on right now, Michael Reuter from Midwest Solar, and also Nick from Full Spectrum Solar. So we have one from each of our installers here tonight. That's great. Guys, I just want to open up the floor to you all just real quick to point out anything that I may have gotten incorrect or that I may have missed while I take a short breather and take a sip of water.
Well, there's also Stanley here as well.
Thanks, Nick. He introduced me earlier on. But,
oh, okay, cool.
No, Sam, I think this is one of the better presentations so far. I think you've revised some of your slides a little bit from what I've seen. Some really good questions going on in the Q&A though. So anybody that hasn't flipped through those and kind of seen the question and answer that's going on, I think that's pretty helpful.
Yeah, if there are technical questions right now, Stanley, Nick, Michael, you can more than be happy to go ahead and answer them. Justice, do you have any kind of technical questions that have come up right now, maybe that we can address before we even move on?
Honestly, a lot of them have been answered, but I'll just say, and any of the attendees can go into the Q&A and see what's been answered, so you can see what the installers have already said. We do have a question about net metering, but I can address that later.
Okay, great. And we can certainly answer those at the end of the Q&A session as well. I definitely want to keep it moving because it seems like we do have a very engaged and attentive audience. I want to make sure we save time at the end of the discussion for that because it's possible. I can't see the questions right now because of my screen sharing. So I'm just going to keep going and we can address those at the end if they don't get addressed in the chat or in the text. So a couple of reasons why it's important to install solar, even in a very northern state like Wisconsin. First reason is solar now has become really affordable for most folks out there. Prices on residential solar have dropped from 70 to 75% in the last decade. This graph right here indicates where the overall price of solar has gone in the last 10 years. So one important piece of information to note, this graph also incorporates commercial and utility scale solar as well. Like many industries, as we get into economies of scale, of course, that will drive those prices down a little bit. So if you're looking at those figures on the right side and thinking, oh, great, $1 per watt, that's what my solar array is going to cost. Well, unfortunately, for residential solar arrays, it's a little bit closer to $3 per watt. But the important takeaway here is, as you can see, as that yellow line, the cost in solar has dropped almost exponentially in the last 10 years. That corresponds almost exactly to the blue bars, which indicate how much solar as a nation we have installed since 2010. So as you can see, as we ramp up solar production, the price comes down. There's a few reasons why the prices come down. Again, the main reason is that economy of scale. Countries like China, Germany, South Korea, investing a lot of money into the production process of these panels. As you've all probably known from school back in the day, Henry Ford was able to make automobiles relatively cheaply because he was able to make a whole bunch of them at one time, thanks to the assembly line. So very similar situation going on here. As we ramp up production, that cost is able to come down quite a bit. Another reason it's able to come down is the technology is increasing. We're getting more efficient panels, so you don't need to put as many of them on your roof in order to get all of that electricity back. But the, again, main takeaway here, solar has definitely become more affordable for most folks out there. Solar also has become much more reliable. As you can see by this fun animation here, they can hold up to some pretty large hail. They can also hold up to some pretty strong wind gusts as well. Typically now panels are flush mounted to the roof, which means there's not really a lot of air or space underneath for those panels to get swept up. One important piece of weather information, however, that a lot of folks are concerned about is snow. We get a lot of snow in Wisconsin. It is very accurate. And when we do get snow, that snow is going to stay on those panels. And that, of course, unfortunately means that you are not going to see the kind of production that you want. But a couple of things to talk about in that respect. As you can see, the panels are a dark color, typically black or a dark blue. Again, they also are installed at an incline too. So typically, those panels stay a little bit warmer, they melt the snow, and the snow does eventually slide off. Now, if we get one of those big 12-inch snowfalls, especially a big snowfall followed by a cold snap, that snow will stay on your roof for several days, maybe even longer, and you're not going to produce electricity. But the good news is our solar installers actually take that into account when they do your modeling. So if they say, you're going to produce, let's say, X amount of kilowatt hours per year, they actually take into account sort of losses to snowfall in this part of the country. So while it is a concern, it's not as much of a concern, I think, as what a lot of folks may think of. So in general, though, we know solar is really reliable. We know the sun comes up every day, and that means that those panels, most of the time, are going to make a fair amount of electricity. Another reason why solar is a really great idea, we create jobs, homegrown jobs. The folks that are going to be installing your solar array, I'm happy to announce all 3 of our solar installation firms are located here in Madison. All of the folks that are performing these jobs also live within our communities. So you are really helping out the local economy also by installing a solar array. By the way, that guy in the picture there, Michael Reuter, is on the webinar tonight. So I don't know, I just want to acknowledge that and throw that out there. Another good reason why it's really great to install solar is it increases the value of your home. So if you don't plan on spending the next 25, 35, 45 years in your home, that's okay, because it's going to increase the value of your home. This study here by the National Renewable Energy Laboratory out of Colorado showed that solar-powered homes sold for faster and for more money than an equivalent non-solar home. So what this means is essentially is, let's say you and your neighbor, both your homes are about the same age, the same size. If you install solar and your neighbor does not, and you both go to sell your home at the same time, your home is likely going to sell for more money and for quicker than your neighbors as well. One caveat is this study was not performed in Wisconsin, but I have talked to some realtors lately, and they have seen that this trend is probably going to be continuing in the Midwest too. So something definitely to consider if you're maybe, again, not considering living in your home for the next 20, 30 years, that's okay, because it's still going to pay off for you in the long run. So speaking of payoffs, I want to get right into the economics because we're running a little bit behind tonight, and I'm sure the prices and the economics and the incentives are something that everyone is really excited to see and hear about and talk about. I also want to talk a little bit about the benefits of joining a group buy like MadiSUN. So there is a bit of a price break as well for most of our installers and most of the systems that they're installing. It amounts to about a 5% or larger discount. But the bigger reason, one of the bigger benefits to joining a group buy is just the simplification of the process. So what we do is, as Renew Wisconsin, we go out and we vet these solar contractors. I have seen the work that all three of them do. They all three do excellent work. Another reason why it's great to join a group buy, we bring in homeowners from around the city. By bringing in a bunch of homeowners together at the same time, that's another way we're able to bring that price down a little bit. And then we also provide consulting and education services as well. Webinars just like this one that are unbiased. We're not going to tell you you need to buy our product because I don't make a product. I don't install a product. We're just here to provide education and make sure you understand exactly how the process works and to hopefully sort of provide an extra layer of customer service throughout the process. In general, we just want to make it really easy for folks because this is a city-funded program. We want to make sure that we are doing the best to educate the residents of our community on solar. So now that I got that out of the way, let's get into some of the rebates and incentives. The first one I want to talk about is from the Focus on Energy program. If you don't know about Focus on Energy, definitely go check it out as soon as this webinar is over. They have dozens and dozens of great energy efficiency programs out there. One of the programs, thankfully, is a rebate for renewable energy. So if you install a solar array, you can qualify for a $500 rebate. It can be even larger than that if you live in one of these selected rural zip codes. Not sure if that applies to any of you folks, but I think Justice can actually put that in the chat if she hasn't already. There are some qualifications, however, that you do have to meet for Focus on Energy. Your rooftop has to be less than 10% shaded, and it also has to face either anywhere from due east all the way down to due south, and then again over to due west. So basically anything that's not north facing, and assuming it is less than 10% shaded, that should enable you to qualify for that rebate. The other, the bigger rebate, at least from a monetary perspective, most likely, is the Solar Federal Investment Tax Credit, or the federal ITC. So this federal tax credit is worth 26% of the cost of your solar array. It was at 26% last year. In 2020, it was actually at 30% back in 2019. It was slated to actually go down to 22% this year. Thankfully, in December of last year, Congress extended those tax credits. So they're staying at 26% this year and next year as well. And then in 2023, they'll resume their schedule of kind of ramping down. And then in 2024, unless Congress adds it in, those tax credits for residential solar arrays will go away. So this is really important because I think we're at a very interesting point right now where the kind of the cost of the components and the system is pretty low, maybe about as low as it's been, and the tax credits are still at a pretty high level as well. So this is kind of the sweet spot right now, which is why it makes this year, next year maybe a little bit as well, a really great time to buy as well. We definitely hope those tax credits will be extended. We're also optimistic that we can maybe still make some headway in terms of solar panel efficiency and solar panel cost as well. But I think this is really a great time to buy because it's sort of this Goldilocks zone of lower prices and also high federal tax credits and incentives and things like that as well. So now that you know kind of some of the basics, rebates and things like that, we can do a cost exercise. So the average size solar array in Wisconsin is about 5 kilowatts. I think in the Madison area, it's maybe slightly below that, but the important thing to point out, and I haven't really talked about this yet, I probably should, our solar installers will tailor each solar array to the size of your home. And when I say the size of your home, I mean how much electricity it consumes. So if your home, let's say typically will consume about 450 kilowatt hours per month, you're probably going to be at about a 4 kilowatt solar system. Again, every house is going to be a little bit different, Our solar installers are really great at sizing the solar arrays to fit your home, but this is just sort of a hypothetical 5 kilowatt system. So that hypothetical 5 kilowatt system through MadiSUN will run you approximately $14,500. With a focus on energy rebate, that would take $500 off of that. With a federal tax credit, that removes another $3,600 off the price tag, and that leaves you with an out-of-pocket cost of a little over $10,000. So again, out-of-pocket cost, very different from installed cost. Both of these rebates come sort of on the back end or after you've already installed your array. So something to think about if you're thinking about either how much money you need to set aside, or if you're thinking about financing. Justice can also put some information in the chat if she hasn't already about financing. That definitely is an option right now, and we can talk about that a little bit more in the Q&A if that is necessary. So this is sort of what you're looking at for a reduction in price. This is, again, just sort of a hypothetical ballpark figure. But now that we know the cost of our array, or the out-of-pocket cost, we can calculate our energy value. So if we take that same hypothetical 5 kilowatt solar array, typically in Wisconsin, we see around 1,300 hours of annual production time. And what that means, annual production time is basically a scientific way of saying sunny hours. So we get about 1,300 hours of sunny hours per year in Madison, per year in Wisconsin. So that times your 5 kilowatt solar array yields about 6,500 kilowatt hours of electricity production per year. And kilowatt hours, that's that same metric that the utility bills you for. So if we look at, depending on if you're in Madison Gas and Electric territory or if you're in Alliant territory, your rates are going to look a little different. But essentially what that means is we can calculate energy value. So if you are on Madison Gas and Electric, which is typically a little over 13 cents per kilowatt hour, that hypothetical 5 kilowatt array is going to yield you approximately $800 in savings per year. Of course, that number will vary quite a bit year by year. It depends on everything from how you use your electricity, when you use your electricity, to what kind of sunshine we get during the year. That actually, our weather patterns actually play more into that than anything else. We had a couple of years ago, we had one of the cloudiest, I think it was falls in winters on record, and a lot of people did not produce nearly as much energy as they were hoping to. They were very upset, of course, but we just had to explain, like, that's just how Mother Nature works, unfortunately. But now that we know sort of what our annual savings can be, we can compare that to the cost of our system, and that will yield us a return on investment period, or a ROI period. So for most solar arrays, most residential solar arrays in Wisconsin, it takes approximately 10 years to pay that off. Now that number can fluctuate quite a bit, like I said, based on how much sunshine we get during months and years, to how you use your electricity, to even when you use your electricity, in the case of time of use rate. If you have a shadier rooftop, that ROI time is going to be extended. If you don't, if we have a sunny year, that actually might get reduced as well. But I think 10 years is a good ballpark figure that most folks can expect for their solar arrays to pay themselves off. Like I said, if you switch to a time of use rate, you might be able to bring that down even more, maybe around 7 years. And this equates to, even if we go with the 10-year, sorry, there's a bug flying around my office here, that equates to about a $20,000 in savings over a 30-year lifespan of your solar system. And this isn't taking into account potential increases in electricity rates over the year too, which is what we can generally assume to expect. So I've been talking for a while. I want to see if there are any immediate questions that need to be answered, and Justice, you can let me know if there are.
No, I think the installers have been doing a great job of keeping up in the chat and Q&A, so thank you. And I'll just remind folks, yeah, feel free to put questions in the Q&A or the chat, and we can address them either in real time or in our open question session very shortly.
Yep, so now I just want to walk you through kind of the steps to the process. If you haven't done so already, sign our I'm interested form. Justice can put a link to that form in the chat. What that form does is it tells us at MadiSUN a little bit of information about your home, how much electricity you typically use, and then some other details as well. We will evaluate your home. We'll give you a phone call to discuss your electric use, to discuss kind of some cost estimates, system size estimates, things like that. If your home doesn't look like it's a good fit for solar, or if there are some other extenuating circumstances, we can certainly make some recommendations. If it does look good, what we can do is schedule a site assessment for you with our installers. At that point, our installers will give you a much more in-depth evaluation of your roof, of your electric panel, and of your solar potential as well. They'll also talk a little bit more specifically, excuse me, about the components they use and some of the suggestions they have as well. After that, after your assessment, they will issue you a proposal that will detail the specific size, the type, and the layout of your array. It will also go much more in depth as to the costs that you can expect and some of the rebates that you can expect as well. If that looks good, what you will do is you will select which contractor you like. If you happen to solicit bids from multiple installers, it's up to you if you want to do that or not. But again, if you are comfortable with that proposal, what happens is the contract will be issued to you by the solar installer, and then you would sign that contract if it is to your liking. And then after that, our installers will come up and install your solar array. This is quite a lengthy process. I know our installers have been running about 2 to 3 months out. Please correct me if that's wrong. But I will say that in that entire process, the actual construction of the solar array only takes about a day or two at most. So a lot of it is on the back end, securing permits, designing the system, going through the financial information with you as well. But ironically, the actual installation of the array takes a very short period of time. So I am at time right now, and I need another sip of water because my voice is getting a little strained, but I certainly open up the floor for questions. Again, Stanley, Nick, and Michael, if I have misspoke or said anything that is incorrect, or if I've left anything out, please speak up at this time. I'm going to give you the floor to make any remarks. Otherwise, I will open up the Q&A for questions.
The only thing I'm surprised nobody asked about yet was batteries. And the really short answer with batteries, I guess, would be, for somebody that's concerned about power outages, significantly concerned about them, a battery can be a valid option. But short of that, there's not a real big financial incentive for folks in Wisconsin, most Wisconsin utility territories, to add a battery. So I like to say it's kind of either for somebody that's concerned about an outage or somebody that wants to be part of kind of that early adopter, I'm supporting what's going to happen next. Almost proud to pay a little more than the masses to support that. And we do see a number of those folks. And I think that the numbers of batteries will continue to increase. So just in case anybody's been wondering about that.
No, that's great information. Thanks, Stanley. Nick, Michael, do you guys have anything to add?
Yeah, one thing I would, I don't know how likely this is, but I do know that there is a possibility, speaking about the Focus on Energy grant, for that grant to run out by the end of the year on occasion. And so that just keep in mind that if you are interested in looking for that grant, sooner is better. And you want to, install and have install completed before you apply for that grant. So just keep that in mind.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Nick. I know last year that the pool of that money for residential solar had to be refilled multiple times. Thankfully, Focus on Energy did find the funds there, but yeah, it's definitely not something you want to take a risk on, is it? Okay, so Justice, do you mind letting us know what the questions are?
Sure. We currently don't have any that are open, but I'm happy to re-ask, I guess, some live if you'd like.
Sure. Actually, I had a question for our installers, and that was we've had a lot of folks asking about electric vehicles recently. Electric vehicles are really picking up speed and momentum and popularity. If someone is interested in purchasing an electric vehicle, maybe they already even have one, and they want to put in a solar array, do they need any sort of extra equipment to do that, or can they just literally plug it right into the wall?
So any fully electric vehicle, or even if partially electric that's got a large enough battery, you're almost going to have a level 2 charger in most use cases. I know a few folks that don't drive a lot that are able to keep their vehicle charged with just a regular 120 outlet. So one thing too is as relates to EVs, if you're looking at sizing your system and you know that within the next 12 months, 16 months, something like that, that you might be adding an EV, it's fairly easy to calculate how many extra kilowatt hours you might consume given your preference of vehicle and the number of miles you drive. So that's something to keep in mind. We can estimate that, and depending on your tolerance, either add more panels later or install extra panels up front to account for the future addition. But then a level 2 car charger, I think frankly, I think all the group buy folks will do it, but then most regular electricians will do that as well. And we're happy to do it as part of the project, but we're also happy to let that work get shared with a local electrician that someone trusts if they're familiar with that work. Because frankly, sometimes they can do it a little bit cheaper than we can. So that's our take on it anyway.
Yeah, I'd say I generally agree with what Stanley said. If someone's looking at a car in the next 12 months, it's something that we can certainly plan for. If someone tells me their car is in the next 5 or 6 years, typically I don't encourage them to plan for it now. And we can either make additions later, or they can add the EV charger later. Technology, especially with electric vehicles, is pretty fast moving. So also, to Stanley's point, any qualified electrician can put in a 220 outlet. We're also happy to include it on the installation. If you don't have your car yet, you might want to consider, do you know what kind of car you're getting? Where is the charge port going to be on the car? Are you buying a Tesla? Are you buying a Leaf? Are you buying a Bolt? They all have different locations for the charge port. So that's just something to consider, because I'm a future planner, so I always want to make sure that people are getting what they're going to be most happy with, not dragging a charging cord across their garage to plug in. So once you have the equipment, that's really a good time to plan for it. So.
Yeah, I noticed we did have a question too about from Dan that said, can I get into the group buy now and do the install at a later date? It said we will close on our next house at the end of August and hoping to put a new roof. That is great. We like new roofs, right, guys? Over the area where the solar panels will be. Is there an advantage to contracting earlier? I'm going to start with this and then kind of let you guys fill in. The tax credits are at the same rate. We do have a slight price discount again going this year with the group buy. We don't necessarily know what prices are going to be around next year, but we always suggest doing it earlier, just because as we get further and further into the summer, things get backed up. But I want you guys to kind of chime in and let him know what you think about that.
Yeah, from my perspective, buying a house, as having done that twice, is already pretty stressful. So I would get through that process and figure out who your roofer is going to be. But then certainly if you want to take advantage of it and receive that tax benefit when you file your upcoming taxes for next spring, You would want to try to get that completed by the end of the year. But ultimately, I don't know. I think I don't want to speak for anyone else. I think Arch would probably we'd probably be willing to offer some group buy pricing to somebody in your circumstance, just because ultimately the discount, like Sam said, it's not like you're getting 50% off or something. So, but my recommendation is get into the new house and actually maybe get a couple of months of consumption under your belt, or even ask at closing if the old owners would be willing to share some of that so you can get an idea, especially if you're in Alliant territory. MG&E, it's a little easier to look backwards, but getting a sense for what you're going to consume might also be helpful as you size your system. It's a long-winded answer, sorry.
I think that was a great answer, Stanley. I agree. I mean, generally, getting some usage history especially on a new home, it's probably not going to be exactly like your own home. We want to do what's right for our customers. So the more information we have, the better.
I have a quick question for Lisa, actually. Lisa, does the city of Monona have any sort of goals for what they'd like to see? I know you have a 100% renewable goal for city operations, but I just want to know, does that correspond to community? Is there any sort of goal for community? What's happening there?
Yeah, so in that 100% clean energy resolution, it lays out both municipal energy goals and community energy goals. So in general, the municipal energy goals have a bit of a shorter timeline. I believe we're aiming to hit 100% clean energy for municipal energy needs by 2040. And then there's also a section of the resolution that talks about our community energy goals, and that I believe the goal date for that is 2050 for 100% clean energy. So obviously having more people install solar panels is a great way to get to that. But I think we're also, because MG&E is the main service provider in Monona, like we are working with them and other municipalities who are part of MG&E's sort of service area to make sure that they are keeping up with their energy goals, so that is helping sort of cover our community energy needs.
Great. Yeah, you're holding their feet to the fire, right?
Yeah, doing our best.
Justice, if we had any other questions come in, or any maybe that got missed in the chat, or maybe the Justice that you're hearing from some of the folks you're talking to.
Actually, one just came in from Dan, and this is one that I've heard quite frequently lately. What are the warranties like on solar panels? Do they protect production level decreases over time?
Nick, do you want to take that one?
Sure, yeah. So most modules do account for production decreases over time. Most manufacturers have a limited, a linear degradation warranty. It's, somewhere in the range of, it depends on the module, usually at least 80% by 25 years. Some you can get higher end modules that are closer to like a 92% in 25 years. It's and they by linear they mean they degrade a certain percent every year. Whether that's 0.6% if you're talking closer to an 80%, or more of a 0.3 if you're closer to a 90%, or they'll have slightly different numbers than that. But it's that's roughly what you'll be seeing.
Anything to add there from any of the other guys?
Just check the spec sheet. It definitely varies.
We have just a couple of minutes left. Stanley, Nick, and Michael, can you all put your email addresses into the chat, just in case folks have questions later on, maybe technical questions that Justice or I can answer. If there's no more questions left, I have one more that I'd like to sort of ask, but I just want to make sure there aren't any other ones from our audience that should be addressed first. Justice, you can give me the go ahead on that if you want. if that's the
Yep,
case.
you are good.
So I have a question. It's a two-part question. One is, what is the advantage of microinverters outside of just spatial constraints? And also, what do you guys think is going to be something new coming up? Maybe not next year, but maybe you know, in a couple of years that you think the regular residential solar market is going to latch onto.
The first question, I mean, you might want to clear an hour to discuss the debate between microinverters and string inverters. I think string inverters will typically come with a better cost price point. And, you know, I think Michael answered a question earlier in the chat about rapid shutdown, which is really the main reason you need some sort of, you know, if not per panel, you know, per couple of panels, per few panels, you need some sort of shutdown that keeps that voltage safe in an emergency. But the reason we tend to go with microinverters is they tend to be really easy to add to the system later, which we find people doing a lot more often than you might expect. And then the Enphase that we use, you know, they've got the 25-year warranty on the inverter, and some of the string inverters, the standard warranty is more like a 12-year. So I think if someone's going with the string inverter, they might want to consider extending that warranty. I know some of those manufacturers offer that extension. But yeah, ultimately, Solar Edge, I think, is something that a lot of folks are going to use on the string inverter side. That's going to have electronics under each panel that accomplishes a lot of the same things that the microinverter does, which is if you have a partially shaded array, something of that nature, you're still going to get production out of the remaining panels. So I'm curious if I started a debate or if I was diplomatic enough with my response.
I think that was pretty diplomatic. Yeah, I you know, a lot of module level power electronics MLPEs are trying to get to the same end goal, right? Rapid shutdown is number one. That's pretty much required unless you're doing a ground mount. You can get that through Solar Edge with DC optimizers. You can get that through SMA and Tigo, or they're not branded Tigo anymore, I apologize. Or you can get that through Enphase microinverters. For us, it really depends on what your specific use case is. Like Stanley said, are you trying to add on to your home later or add panels to your home later? Are you planning some sort of addition or expansion that's going to, you know, make you want to expand the system in the future? Are you like me and you just don't know what you're going to do, and so you go with microinverters just because you're undecided? You know, largely string inverters are less expensive, and I think it's all generally good technology and can be reliable if installed properly, as all installers here would do. So you know, typically take the recommendation of the professional who's, you know, proposing your system would be my recommendation. So
Yeah, I would definitely agree with everything that's been said. Microinverters are definitely a better all around option. They're better for easier expansion. String inverters, one minor benefit, it's just a very, very minor point. I've seen them have a slightly higher efficiency on converting DC to AC. And sometimes if you go for an extremely large system, they're a little bit better in that case. So they end up being, you know, beneficial in like commercial installs. And so if you get, you know, if you get a house that's, you know, closer to a commercial install than some of the other houses around you, you know, I've seen some houses that have, you know, 20 kilowatt systems on them. They can definitely benefit from the string inverters.
Excellent. Thanks.
And
I
then the
appreciate you all not getting into a big debate so late in the evening. So thank you so much for helping us out tonight. Thank you to all the viewers as well for sticking around so late on such a lovely evening. Thanks to Elisa as well and the City of Monona for all the outreach help that they've done on this. Really appreciate your work in getting the word out on solar. And at this point, I just want to thank everyone again for attending tonight and remind you that this webinar has been recorded and we will be up on the web very shortly. So thanks again and have a great evening.